between the ages of 0 and 7, your money habits, your money personality are set.
Holy cow. Welcome back to the Wild Business Growth Podcast. It's probably a good sign if you stumble over the name of your podcast. Welcome back to the Wild Business Growth Podcast. This is your place to hear from a new entrepreneur every single Wednesday morning who's turning wild ideas into wild growth. I'm your host, Max Brandstetter, founder and podcast producer at Max Podcasting. And you can email me at max@maxpodcasting.com to save time with your high-quality podcast. This is episode 2, lucky number 270. And today's guest is Shannah Game. Shannah is an award-winning money expert, a certified financial planner, and the host of the award-winning podcast, Everyone's Talkin' Money. Her podcast has been downloaded. At the time of this recording, it has been downloaded over 24 million times. She has published over 1,000 episodes. It has been named Top 4 Money Podcast by the New York Times. And in this episode, we talk money tips and mindful money tips as it relates to entrepreneurship, as it relates to travel, Shannah's story, getting into the money space and starting the podcast in the first place and why it's blown up so much, and everything from IU to the best burgers in Asheville, North Carolina. It is Shannah, and she's game, and everyone's talking money. Enjoy the show. Alrighty, we are here with Shannah Game, who's got game. She literally made that joke right before we hit record, so I had to throw that in there. Formerly straight out of Compton, and already we'll probably have to edit this entire intro. But Shannah, super excited to connect. We've met in person once at Podcast Movement. We'll get to that, but Everyone's Talking Money, one of the top finance, and I'll just say overall podcasts in the game, and a really cool story yourself as well. Thank you so much for joining and stopping a mid-basketball movie filming. How are you doing?
Right, exactly. Yeah, I'm great. I'm so excited to be here, jokes and all.
Good. Well, unfortunately for you, that's the only joke we have today, and that's about as much time as we have allowed. So thank you for that.
That was a great interview. My best.
That wasn't the most efficient
My best,
ever?
Yes.
No, but we're going to get into all things with your show and some entrepreneurial tips and finance tips. And as a little afterword from the teaser I started with, so one of my favorite conferences to go to pretty much every year is Podcast Movement. And you never know who you're going to end up having a conversation with or sitting next to. And it just so turns out that the first session I went to in Podcast Movement 2023 in Denver, you were seated next to me, or I was seated right next to you rather. And, doing the networking thing, just saying, hey, and of course, one of the first things that we find out is that we both went to IU. We both went to Indiana University. It's like, what are the odds? And then I find out you have, you're living in Asheville, you have Asheville ties. My wife, Dana's family has Asheville ties as well. So just so many things that in common before even me researching and being wowed by, holy cow, that I should have asked for your autograph right there, because your podcast is killer.
Wow, can you do my morning wake up call every morning, right? Just my pump it up.
Sure. Yeah, exactly. You can find me on Cameo for alarm clocks and ringtones. But on that IU note, so I actually found out that you started a business while you were at IU, which I was a slacker. I just studied business. I didn't start anything back then. But what was the business you started back then?
It was at the time, this is many years ago, but it was at the time the first National Student Film Festival. And I ended up running it for about 3 years in college by the time we got it up and running, and then 2 years after college, and then sold it actually to a Hollywood film producer. So it was so much fun. I mean, I loved it. It was great because I was learning all these things, in my college classes, and then I would literally apply them to the business that I was running. But it was really, I have an MBA, but that was really my like street MBA. That was where I got all the expertise for sure.
Street MBA, like that's a new term. It's taken over the nation. But how did you even come up with the idea to like not just do anything in the film space, which I think is always cool, but to actually start a festival?
I was born in Indianapolis, so I kind of have, Indiana roots in me. But my family moved to Los Angeles when I was young, and I decided to go back to IU for college. And at the time, I thought I wanted to be a Hollywood producer or something in the entertainment world. And I just thought, being a female and being young, I needed to do something that really set myself out from everyone else. And I can't even really remember where the inspiration came from, but I was driving down, if anyone's familiar with Los Angeles, the 405 freeway, which is notorious for being like the worst freeway in the world, and was driving with my dad. And I said, I don't know, I kind of just have this crazy idea of starting this thing. It was between my freshman and sophomore year at school. And he was like, yeah, hey, why not go for it? So within a few months, I had set up a nonprofit organization and launched the film festival. Had absolutely no idea what I was doing. There were 4 or 5 of us in kind of the core crew, and we were raising about $250,000 a year to put this thing on. And it was just all kind of came from an idea of trying to really set myself apart from everyone else.
What did you learn from that early entrepreneurial journey of trying to set yourself apart, which I'm sure was just a walk in the park?
I mean, I learned so much. I learned about, PR. I learned about, putting events together. I learned about we were dealing with, entertainment industry people that we would have out to the festival. And so there's personalities and conflict and all of that. I also learned how to manage a team. We had a team of student volunteers. And obviously the money side, right, which is what sort of turned into my career now, was learning how to be super resourceful with a small amount of money, a relatively small amount of money, and how you could take that and kind of transform that into something that, people would come to the festival and they're like, oh my gosh, like I can't believe students put this on. And so that was like such a great compliment. And, at that time, there were only, I think there was one other student film festival that existed, but it was really small. And, then there were the big ones like Sundance, and South by Southwest in Austin had just kind of started up. And so some of the guests had been to those festivals. And when they came to ours, they were like, yours is on caliber, like on par with what, some of these other festivals that have millions of dollars are creating. And so we really just became kind of a ninja in all of these different skills that it takes to really operate, certainly an entrepreneurial venture, but anything that is just, sort of hatched from an idea.
So you were the inspiration for the Sundance episode of Entourage.
Of course, yes. I mean, absolutely. I'm glad it's getting out on this show.
It was only a matter of time. No, that's super cool that you did that. And yeah, I remember like when I was in college, any of my classmates and there weren't many of them, but any that did start a business or any, fellow student entrepreneurs, it's super impressive when you see somebody do that because, classes and social life and anything else in college takes up enough time. How did you carve out time to make this a priority in college with so much going on?
I don't know. I loved what I was doing, and it felt so intuitive, so natural to me that it felt like my social life. It felt like my fun. It felt, it didn't feel heavy like a business. And that's probably because I started, when I was 19 years old and I didn't know any different. It just became who I was. And, I got a lot of friendships from it, and still am friends with so many of those people still here all these many years later. So I don't know, like I never was somebody who was really into, going to the frat parties and all of that sort of stuff. I just thought it was really cool to be able to kind of take this idea that I had and turn it into something and like watch it come to life. So that's really what excited me.
That's a shame. I mean, it just sounds like a real bummer. So it's really unfortunate you didn't get anything out of that. But no, but you had a very exciting ending with that, the grand finale of the movie, or the movie ending, as the kids say. How was that process of selling it, and especially selling it to like somebody who's in a pretty cool spot?
It was wild.
Oh, great word. You came
wild.
prepared.
We're going to say this word often. It was the second to the last year, actually. And I've tried to remember how this happened, and I just don't have the memory. But a new company was started by this Hollywood exec and a few other people. And at the time, this was crazy. This was back when companies were paying individuals like a ton of money to start a website for them. I mean, now it sounds ridiculous, but that was their business model. Really wasn't a business model. They had actually bought a piece of the festival and actually hired me on as a consultant to help them build out a collegiate division where they were going to create all this content and kind of go after, college students. And so we kind of, paired up. And then a couple months in, the executive said, hey, I actually want to buy your festival, like the whole thing from you, and operate it, from this new company. So I was like, okay, I mean, this is fantastic. I love doing the festival, but the idea of selling it sounded really, really cool and awesome. And so I sold the festival, and I think it was about 3 months before the .com crash in 2001. And so the festival went down after I'd sold it, went down in, blaze of glory with the stock market crash, and the company ended up sort of folding, and the whole festival just sort of fell apart after I had sold it. So that was a little bit of a, really like sort of stain for me. And I tried to revive it a couple years ago, actually, with like a new sort of premise, and just didn't get, everything around it that I wanted to do. And so I don't know, the idea is still kind of circulating there. We had this idea of changing it and calling it College Film Wars, and kind of using a real sort of cool competitive environment between different colleges. So I don't know. I mean, it's definitely a love of mine, but I don't know if it will ever go anywhere further than it went.
So let's go further than it has went, if that's proper English. Let's get to some money stuff, as it's properly called again. So everyone's talking money. Awesome podcast that you've been doing since I was 3. No, I'm just kidding. No, but you've been doing it for, at the time of this recording, getting somewhat close to a decade of doing it, which is pretty cool, and millions and millions and millions of downloads, and just awesome press PR. So endless congrats for all of that. Just like really, 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 really cool, even if I can't say really that many times in a row. What's really cool about the podcast is that you of course, have some of the top names in finance on. You have really, really helpful episodes, whether it's interviews or solo, in the money space, but you've crafted an incredible, I guess, tone of voice. Like your relatability as you're podcasting is unmatched out there. And I think part of my hypothesis of what makes your show so popular is people feel like, they're listening to a friend when they're listening to you, not just somebody who knows their finances. And you talk about all sorts of things that a lot of different, financial experts don't talk about. So that was, again, a big preamble that you've paid me for, so thank you for that.
Again, that will be in my wake-up call.
Yeah, exactly. This is I hope you're, waking up for 2 hours at a time. But where did this interest in the financial space really hit ahead till you realize that, like, I want to build a career and even a show out of this?
Well, first, I just want to say a big thanks. That actually really means a lot to me. That relatability is something that is so important to me, particularly in the money space, because I feel like a lot of people are just regurgitating sort of the same old content in this space, and that was never something I wanted to do. And a lot of times I've been criticized about how I talk about money, and at the end of the day, I'm like, okay, well, this is just what I think after spending many years actually working with people, like legitimate, actual money expert stuff. it was crazy because I after the film festival got sold, I was like, well, what am I going to do now with this weird sort of set of skills? I didn't know what to do. And so I went back and started getting my MBA and MBA in entrepreneurship. And at that time, my dad he'd been in the financial industry his whole career, and he's had a small firm, and he's like, I'm kind of bored. Do you want to just see if we can work together? I was like, sure. All right. Why not? And so, from day one, we were working with people with these massive estates, and I got to really learn that we all get tripped up by the same money stuff, and then I was looking at my peers who were in, getting MBAs as well, and they knew nothing about personal finance. So I basically took my skills that I learned from the film festival, which is speaking, writing, talking about money and making something, really relatable. And that's what I started doing. I started speaking on stages. Podcasting wasn't really a thing when I started the finance world, but I started blogging, and I had written an article about 20 money steps to take in your 20s, something of that sort. And it ended up going viral. And so I thought, okay, this is really interesting. There must be something to this millennial demographic and money. And I was I taught at a university in Los Angeles for 10 years. I created personal finance courses for them. And one day I asked my students, like, what should I do? Should I create a YouTube, or like, how should I get more of my content out there? And they're like, oh my gosh, you should create a podcast. And so that was on a Friday, and I came up with the name Millennial Money because back in 2015, it was really easy to find a really nice podcast name that nobody else had. And on Tuesday, I released my first episode. So I didn't even think a whole lot about it. I got a microphone and I just, started podcasting. And, I think it was within the first 2 months. One day I was at an event and like my phone was just blowing up. All these people were contacting me. I'm like, what is this about? And my brother sent me a text, and he was like, your show is the number 2 show in all of podcasts, like above Rachel Maddow. And I'm like, what? Like, how is this even I don't even know what I'm doing. How is this even possible? And so, that sort of became the genesis for the show. We changed the name in 2021. Yeah, it literally came from this kind of weird toolbox of skills where I love to take stuff and make it relatable, and just also a love for personal finance and helping people.
So besides relatability, which I already gave you that one, what else do you think made the show pop so much, and have such momentum in those early days when it started as, it sounds like a really, really fun weekend project at the start?
I wish I knew the exact answer to that question. My guess is that I try to really break down complex money topics into easy to understand bits. I also, from the beginning, I wasn't doing interviews, and then I realized interviews is actually a really great strategy and I don't have to talk all the time. So when I started doing interviews, I tried to really curate the people that I was choosing, and I tried to make sure there was a real story behind the information they were sharing. Otherwise, I think talking about personal finance can get really dry and boring. And so I was just in this constant search of trying to find a unique angle. I mean, we could pick any of the popular topics, saving money or budgeting or whatever, and I could spin that 1,000 different ways with, so many different guests, and each episode would be different. The listener would have a different experience. So I was really in search of story behind everything. And then also, I guess this is part of the relatability, but I was really honest about my own money struggles and other people that I had worked with in hopes to show people that we were all so much more alike and sort of break down those walls around, the stigma and the taboo about money. And then I think there are a lot of money shows out there, probably a lot of podcasts where people just come on and they start touting like all the money they've made and how great they are. And I just find that it really makes me want to throw up. I just don't like that.
It could have a collective purging of those types of, yeah.
Yeah. So, I kept kind of continually shaping my message and what I was about, and just hoping that the listeners would come along with me as I, traveled down this road and like really tried to hone my niche and what I stand for. And, luckily they have thus far. So there hasn't been a revolt yet. So I don't know, I think it's just a collection of things, but I just am always trying to do what feels right to me versus what everybody else is doing.
Well, I think people really respond to that. I think that it's so overused. I'm not going to use the word authenticity, but if I was, it would be that word. People being genuine and like true to themselves. I think that's what, especially over the podcasting medium, like just a voice into the mic, that's what comes across so well. And the more you are close to yourself and what you want to talk about and who you want to interview, like I just always felt that listeners and your audience are energized when you're energized, and like they become passionate about things that you're passionate about, or there's shared interest in the same thing. That's what can make something really pop. So it's been an incredible journey for you. What has been over the years the biggest adjustment you've had to make, besides of course changing the name, which we'll get to in a minute, the biggest adjustment you've made with the podcast that maybe took some time to actually move forward with?
That's a really good question.
Thank you. That's the only good one I got.
I would say, the biggest adjustment had to come from me and trusting my skills and trusting that I have a seat at the table. I think that it's really easy for me to second guess. Do I really know what I'm doing? Like, am I really helping people? And I think podcasting is such a weird thing because you don't see all of those people listening to you. And so you struggle to kind of get that human to human connection and to see their faces.
It might actually be a little creepy if you just saw them listening to you.
That might be a little creepy. Yeah, it's probably for the better. But I'm someone who I want to make sure I'm not just talking to talk, that there is a purpose behind it and that it is helpful for people or entertaining or educational, whatever word you want to throw in there. So I think it's really, trusting myself and trusting that I have been doing this for 9 years and we do have success, and there's still a lot more success that can come, and that, I deserve to be in the place that I'm in.
And on the name, so you hear about podcasts changing their names sometimes, but not too often it happens when a show is already established and successful. What went into changing that name? Because I think you were obviously focused on millennials beforehand, and now you're focused on everyone. So how'd that go down?
I still to this day am like, I don't know. I don't know if it was the right decision or the wrong decision. I mean, I could look at it a million different ways. My show's been lucky enough to be ad sponsored for many years now, which is my, primary source of income from the show. And I was hearing from a lot of advertisers that actually they were interested in moving away from the specific millennial space. And then depending on what sort of age demographic survey you look at, I either fall into a Gen X or like a really old millennial. And so I was sort of feeling myself outgrowing that moniker, if you will. And, we had thought about it for quite some time. And actually, my husband, who's the producer on my show, came up with the name Everyone's Talking Money. And I really like it. We did lose probably about 10-15% of our audience when we made the switch, which, happens in the podcast world, and I was expecting it. But, for me, I love the idea of getting people to a place where they can talk about money openly, where it doesn't have to be scary and fearful and, anxiety ridden and all of the things that we already know come with money. So that was the idea of bringing, everyone together, bringing lots of different perspectives, bringing more guests, bringing, sort of everyone, if you will, at the table talking about money. And then also, over the years as it's developed, I have a very sort of therapeutic angle to how I talk about money. And so for me, also, it's the focus on how you as yourself individually are talking to your own self about money really matters when it comes to achieving goals and doing all the things that you want to do with your money. So the name really has a lot of different meanings associated with it. And it just felt Like if I was going to continue the show on for another, 10 years or 5 years or however long it's going to be, I want a name that really felt right to me. So, I mean, we threw out about a million names, but so many of those names were taken, or the URLs weren't open, or so many, or there was something sort of similar to it. So that's kind of the long and short of how we ended up with it. But it's a tricky thing to do.
It's tricky to rock a podcast, as the song goes, and rock a newsletter as well, especially a newsletter that combines podcasting and entrepreneurship and the worst jokes you'll ever hear. Do you know of any like that? I can't help you. Now, you can sign up for the Podcasting to the Max newsletter that is at maxpodcasting.com/newsletter. Short and sweet, every Thursday, and it will probably make you frown when you read it because the jokes are that bad. Now, let's continue talking money. Since everyone is talking money, I would be remiss. Is that being used correctly?
I think so.
I don't know these terms. These are all new terms to me.
I think remiss is the word.
I get to so close to bringing it home, and then I'm like, I'm not saying that right. Anyway, I would be remiss if we didn't talk some financial tips or mindful money tips, because I think, of course, you know a ton yourself, and you've had some of the top names in the financial world on your show, and I know it totally changes. Everyone in the world is in a slightly distinct or majorly distinct financial situation, so it depends. But I am curious. I'm going to put you on the spot here. Really tricky. Can you share some of your go-to top financial tips or financial habits that kind of, no matter what situation, what scenario you're in, it's a good thing to start thinking and start acting this way towards your money?
Yeah, I would say the number one thing that people don't think about is something I call your relationship with your money. So just like you have a partner or you have friends and, you hang out with them, you're interested in them, you talk to them, hopefully, right? You're nice to them, you
I never talk to my friends.
Dinner or drinks or, you want to be in that same sort of relationship with your money. And most of us are in a really crappy, terrible, negative relationship with money. It deeply impacts so many different things. It impacts your ability to achieve your goals. It impacts relationships. It impacts how you feel. It impacts, anxiety, depression. I mean, if we look at the studies around people who are anxious about money or depressed or stressed out about money, it's like 80%, I would argue a lot more, but 80% of Americans. And we can see why. I mean, it's this taboo topic that we don't learn about anywhere. So I would say really understanding that your relationship with money, I define that, how you think, act, and feel about money is so critically important. I spend a lot of time actually talking about money trauma, which is another subject that most people don't really understand. This is kind of a crazy stat, but between the ages of 0 and 7, your money habits, your money personality are set. And they're set by what you witness from whoever raised you and what you don't witness. That kind of all comes together to shape who you are as an adult. So a lot of times we have these habits as adults and we're like, where did this come from? Or, I want to pay off my debt, but I go out and spend money because it makes me feel better. Like, why can't I change this about myself? So those kinds of things. But then also, I think we want money to be really complex, like how do you grow your money? How do you build wealth? Like, we want it to be this really complicated formula, but it isn't. It's focusing on your spending with intention, as I call it, getting some money that's growing faster than the money sitting in your checking account. So, using high yield savings accounts, using retirement accounts, those sorts of things, and setting up an easy automated money system for yourself where paycheck comes in, your money goes out, and it goes to all of these different things, your goals, your bills, whatever, without you having to think about it, is one of the best and kind of easy ways to create less stress when it comes to your money.
Oh yeah, those are all, like, you can tell your niche or whatever there with the money trauma. Like, I had never heard that before I started listening to you, and it's a crazy stat behind it, but it's a really important thing to hit on. It is a relationship with money, and it does become, things that you learn or habits that you have really make a long-term impact, even if it's something that like you're just starting to do on the daily or weekly or monthly and things like that. And I think if you are somebody who's getting a paycheck every 2 weeks or whatever the cadence is there, obviously that's like a great thing to have, like you're consistent. That's coming in, that's consistent. It's less to worry about. And then there's a whole bunch of other crazy people like us called entrepreneurs that
we'll use this word again. It gets
it's
wild.
A little bit different. Some wild entrepreneurs. I've never heard that term actually. No. What advice do you have for entrepreneurs in terms of your relationship with money as an entrepreneur? Because, for example, if you're like in startup mode and you don't have much income yet coming from the business, like then all of a sudden money, which can be very stressful, is like even more very stressful. Just invented a word. And over time, obviously, the idea is to grow the business and have more money coming in, but there's still that stress there. Like, what advice do you have for that relationship with money as an entrepreneur when you're not somebody getting a guaranteed paycheck? Like, you have to earn that money each month.
I think it's even more important to focus on a relationship with money as an entrepreneur. I've been one my entire career, so I know it inside and out, the ups, the downs, and I think not everyone is cut out to be an entrepreneur, and I think that's okay. And I think that, giving yourself a little bit of grace if you've tried the entrepreneurial track and you're like, I can't do it, because it is stressful. It is, sometimes you don't know how much money is coming in. So, being an entrepreneur, I think you have to be really resourceful. This is where I bring back this word. It's an overused word, but intention, really spending your money with intention, being resourceful, stretching money, but really letting go of a lot of the kind of negative self-talk around money and sort of thinking, a lot of times you'll hear, debt is bad. Well, as an entrepreneur, a lot of times you got to do the debt shuffle. You got to have debt. You got to use debt. You got to borrow money. I mean, a lot of times it's using everything available to you to keep your business going and growing. And so I think it's really important to shake loose some of those negative stereotypes around money, that negative thinking, and, really be centered on what you're doing, why you're doing it, and, how to use your money to support you, staying in business, keeping the lights on, another day, another year, whatever it might be for you.
The debt shuffle, that sounds like the line dances we did in middle school. Sounds very exciting. No, it is true. It's just a totally different mindset as an entrepreneur. And I think no matter how established you are, there always is at least a little bit of stress there in terms of like, it isn't a guaranteed paycheck. Like, you got to make sure that like you're always getting new clients and that the current clients you have are happy and like you're delivering high quality work. And it's a constant effort there for those who are in the entrepreneurship or just overall stress with their relationship with money overall. What advice do you have for managing that stress and anxiety that darn thing called money can cause?
Yeah, I've got a lot of tools and exercises. I love to journal. There are a lot of scientific studies around getting things from your head on paper. And so, handwriting things, even if you have terrible handwriting.
Which I do.
Me too. There's an exercise I suggest called financial forgiveness, and it's pretty simple. You set a timer for about 15 minutes, and without judging yourself, you write down every crappy thing about money that you've done, that you should have done, that you're stressed out about. You just get it all out on paper. When the 15 minutes is done, you got to walk away from that sheet of paper, come back to it in about an hour or so. It's up to you. Next day, whatever works. And then there is a mental technique of releasing that. So I like to burn things in a fire, but maybe you're a little gentler. Maybe you want to cut it up with scissors or put it in the paper shredder. But doing exercises like this teaches your brain that you can let go of those things that are kind of keeping you hostage around money. It works really well. Another exercise I do is every morning I have a little notepad by my bed. and I write, it's called Hey, comma, Money. And so I will tell money what I feel about it, if I'm stressed out, if I think I'm going to have a good day, whatever. I just tell money what I think of it in the beginning of the day. And that also signals to my brain, like, okay, I've gotten these thoughts, these feelings about money out on paper. Like, I don't have to obsess about these the whole rest of the day. I can go and focus and kind of live my life, and then I'll come back to it the next morning and tell it again what I think of it, good, bad, ugly, everything in between. So doing some things like that are really helpful. You know, if you're somebody that likes to meditate, there are lots of great meditation techniques out there about visualizing something different, you know, visualizing your money as a friend, or there's lots of different techniques like that. I find sometimes just kind of getting out in nature, whether it's going through a walk or just something to jog your brain out of the space of kind of chronic, you know, negative self-talk, chronic anxiety, chronic thoughts about money, because that will not put you in a space of being able to think very logically or good about your money. So, you know, kind of depending on the type of person you are and what really works for you, you know, there's lots of different ways you can start working on your relationship with money. One of the techniques I tried last year, because I was just having for whatever reason, like a crazy year about my thoughts about money. And it's weird because I do this work with people, so I'm always thinking about money. But I mean, this is going to sound crazy to some people, but try it if you're at least little intrigued. If I'm having sort of like a run-on thought, I will think about that thought and I will literally like mentally put it in a bubble, and I will literally like push that bubble out of my head, almost like, you know, that bubble was exterior of me. And I'll just tell myself like, okay, I let that bubble pass. Like, I don't have to think about that anymore. And sometimes I say to myself, I'm not going to think about that for an hour or for 15 minutes or for 3 hours or whatever it might be. And so I'm literally training my brain to interact differently with money than the way I just sort of intuitively are in a relationship with money. And so I think you can try lots of different things. You know, you do not have to obsess about money 24/7. I give you permission not to do that.
Shannah's famous brain bubbles. I'm all about that. It reminds me, have you ever heard or read the book Bird by Bird?
I've heard of it, but I've not read it, no.
And I'm going to say this wrong. I want to say it's Anne Lamott, but it might be Lamott. I'm not sure maybe French pronunciation. Anyway, we had to read it for school sometime in high school. And that's one of those images that has stuck with me ever since. Is she has this idea very similar to this, you know, Shannah's famous brain bubbles of like, if you have quote unquote, they didn't use the term haters back then, but if you have quote unquote haters, or like there's conversations you have with people that are just kind of like ticking you off or like annoying you can't get out of your head, like almost if you can visualize having a jar, and then as if the people were like mice, and we're like, I don't know, very talkative mice, and like dropping the mice in the jar and then sealing the jar so you can't hear them anymore. And then just like mentally like keep that aside and like don't worry about it, which is very similar to the approach that you're taking. Obviously different like motives behind it, but I'm all for that, of just like do it whatever. You know, it's almost like playing tricks on your brain, but like doing the things to give you that peace and kind of calmness, when a lot of this stuff, when you think about it, can be tied to overthinking or just like, you know, droning on a certain detail for like way longer than you should, or like for your mental health. So that's a really, really good philosophy. I do want to hit on one more money tip or money bucket before we move on here. And that's because like yourself, like you do, and your husband, I'm sure, my wife and I are huge fans of travel, and travel is like a really, really fun thing. But it's also, if you do too much
really
travel
expensive.
or too much expensive travel, yeah, you realize, oh shit, that was actually really expensive. And I think there's a tendency to almost be blinded by the cost of it, or not pay too much attention to the cost of it because you're so excited for the actual trip. And so the reason I'm bringing this up is at the time of this recording. So last year, my wife Dana and I went on our honeymoon to Italy. So it's like awesome. I could talk for, we could talk for weeks straight about the honeymoon. It was amazing. It was also hands down like the most expensive trip that we've ever done. And like the more, we bumped it up to a notch. We went way more like high end than we've ever done for anything. So, looking at finances as like the year goes on and looking back to like big expenses and stuff, it's like, wow, like we had a very expensive year. And it's one of those things that like, as we're looking towards planning our next travel, it's like a tricky spot because we love traveling. Like we want to travel and do like really fun trips every year, but also like, obviously it's not sustainable to do like super expensive, like European trips all the time. What advice do you have for people that like no travel is like, one of the best times of the year, one of the great things to do with you and your partner or even solo, but there is that kind of lurking devil, if you will, of it can be so damn expensive.
I love the lurking devil. I'm friends with the devil. I love to travel too, so this is certainly a topic that I love talking about. A couple of things. One, I'm a hater of budgets. Do not like budgets. I instead am a proponent of what I call a spending plan. And so spending plan is sort of the same thing, but it comes from a completely different frame of thinking about money. So, looking at like, hey, we want to take 2 trips a year and yeah, we want to spend, $5,000 a trip. So how do we incorporate savings for that all throughout the year? So when it comes time for our trip, like we've got the cash, we've got a majority of the money available. It's not something we need to stress out or think about. I think is a really great way of thinking about spending and incorporating, or thinking about traveling and incorporating it into your spending plan. So it just becomes part of who you are and what's important to you and your values as a couple. Another thing is just be really smart with how you spend your money on just everyday expenses. So we use travel credit cards. I'm a big fan of travel credit cards. And we put our monthly expenses, so, everything from our gas to our grocery shopping to a lot of our utility bills on our credit card. We pay it off every month. So we don't have to, incur interest or anything like that. But we build up points and we exchange those points for all sorts of things, hotels, airfare, gift cards, whatever it might be. And I love spending money this way because I would be spending this money regardless. But, using travel credit cards and things like that, I'm able to, reap a reward for my spending that then in turn turns into something of value that we can exchange for our travel and significantly cuts down on our, travel expenses. So I think, thinking outside of the box on how you spend money. I know there's a lot of hate about using credit cards, and yes, we do not want to get into credit card debt, but if we use them the right way, we get all the benefits without any of the negative associated with it. So I would say, if travel is something you love, build it into your spending plan, make it part of your priorities as a couple. And so it doesn't have to feel, shameful when you go out and you spend, a big chunk of money on travel. This is part of what's important to you as a couple. And, you've created a system around it to make it work for you.
In full disclosure, totally agree with all that, but expensive honeymoon trip, like you don't feel bad
totally
about
worth it.
It's like,
totally worth it.
We're yeah, exactly. Like if there's one trip to go all the way over the top for. No, but I appreciate all the tips there and travel and entrepreneurship and beyond and the brain bubbles. Let's wrap up with some rapid fire Q&A. Let's get wild. See, you queued it up there. You don't even know it. This this is a hard cut, but this is a really cool fun fact about you that I'm not sure too many people know about. So I heard that you're deaf in one ear. In the years since that happened, what's the biggest thing that surprised you about losing hearing in one ear compared to what probably many people might expect?
How frustrating it is not to be able to hear everything. I feel like an 80-year-old person walking around constantly going, huh, what did you say? Can you repeat it? But I think internally what it has taught me is I'm always asking myself, what am I listening to? Like it's helped me become a better sensor of what I'm actually paying attention to. But yeah, it's beyond frustrating to not be able to have full hearing.
Well, it's it depends if you're glass half empty or glass
It does
half
come in
full.
handy.
So
It does come in handy if somebody
yeah.
is snoring around you or there's an annoying conversation and you don't want to listen to it. It definitely has its perks.
Right, exactly. And then Asheville, so one of my favorite cities, and as I mentioned before, Dana's dad Gary has a place there and a business there for a long, long time. What is a restaurant or bar or brewery in Asheville that, like, if somebody's going to Asheville for the first time, you're like, you have to hit this spot?
I mean, this is like the hardest question ever because Asheville, if you've never been to Asheville, Asheville is a food city. Oh, God, I love burgers. I could eat a burger all day long. So one of my favorite places is called Baby Bull. They make like throwback old school burgers and just like delicious fries. And yeah, I mean, like if I only had one meal to eat, I'd be at Baby Bull eating a burger.
All right, adding it to the list for next time. Yeah, we last time we went, we just totally ate our way through Asheville. So with you there, and yeah, I think as more and more time goes on, burgers I think is my favorite food ever. It's like, I mean, I love steak, I love all that stuff, but burgers, the fact that you get the bun and the cheese and the top, bacon, barbecue, whatever you go through that. So, all right, coming in for Baby Bowl. All right, IU. What was your kind of happy place or like favorite spot to hit up in Bloomington when you were there?
If we're going to say my favorite place ever is inside an assembly hall watching an IU basketball game, I mean, that's hands down.
Hands down, hands up, stripes out. Yeah, it's a very special place. Reason they call it one of the cathedrals of college basketball. Since you have an interest in film and have started business around film, what is a movie that you have to stop what you're doing anytime you see it on and just keep watching?
It would probably be a holiday movie. It'd be something like The Holiday or some cheesy, Christmas holiday movie. I'm sort of a sucker for all of those. So it would probably be something in that vein.
Like the vacation movies,
well,
like all
yeah,
those.
absolutely, right? Absolutely.
This is totally a guess, so correct me if I'm wrong, but what do you like about giraffes? That sounds so random. That came out of nowhere. There's a reason
I have actually seen giraffes live and in person in Africa in 2012. A couple feet away from some giraffes. So, I mean, majestic. Like, I don't even know how to describe them. Beautiful, beautiful animals. Like, just majestic, and the way they walk is like how I want to embody life. Like, it's purposeful, but it's also like delicate, and yeah, I'm a big fan of giraffes.
Awesome. Majestic all around. I saw a giraffe, which made me think of that, but also my mom's all-time favorite animal is a giraffe. So I don't know, how growing up, we had lots of different giraffe stuff going around. And so, yeah, whenever you see one in person, it's like, wow, helps to put things in perspective. Wish I was 24 feet tall or whatever they are. But Shannah, thank you so much. This has been an absolute blast. Learned a ton. Awesome catching up, and big fan of everything you're about, including burgers in Asheville, which I'm going to hop on a flight right after this that I have budgeted for. No, I'm just kidding. But thanks so much for coming on. Where's the best place for people to subscribe/follow your podcast or watch your podcast, as well as any other place online to connect with you?
Yeah, you can check out Everyone's Talkin' Money. We're on any and every podcast player. We will be on YouTube at the beginning of 2024, depending on when you're listening to this episode, at Everyone's Talkin' Money. And yeah, I would love to have you as a listener, and you can check out the podcast and then from there learn everything else that we're up to.
Perfect. And everyone is talking about it. So I think it's a very clever name. And then last thing, final thoughts. Stage is yours. It could be a quote, one last little piece of advice, or it could just be like you making fun of me for how out of left field that giraffe question was. Whatever you want, send us home here.
Okay, I'm gonna bring it back to entrepreneurship. I would want to leave you with, don't ever doubt your idea. If you have an idea, you think it's good, I want you to go for it. I want you to not care what anyone else is telling you. Everyone's got an opinion, but if you've got something burning inside of you that you want to bring to life, bring it to life.
Game, set, and match. Thank you, Shannah, so much for all you do and all you moolah. And thank you, wild listeners, for tuning in to another episode. If you want to hear more wild stories like this one, make sure to follow the Wild Business Growth Podcast on your favorite app and tell a friend about the podcast. And then share your favorite episode, which might be this one, with them, as well as your favorite episode of Everyone's Talking Money with them and talk about it. And that is the best call to action you will ever hear. You can also find us on Good Pods, where there are good podcasts and podcast recommendations and podcast people. And for any help with podcast production, you can learn more at maxpodcasting.com and sign up for the Podcasting to the Max newsletter. That is at maxpodcasting.com/newsletter. Until next time, let your business run wild.
Bring on the bongos!